And yes, just a small thing to add to my introduction is I'm also a certified Jira project administrator. This is something which I, from a certification perspective, have done very recently. But I've been practicing Jira for a good amount of years, I think probably 5 to 6 years. And fortunately for me, it's not been just a user, but also as an administrator. And that's what I thought I would possibly share some of the best practices and tips when it comes to working with Jira, right? So yes, the flavor of today's workshop webinar would be more around how you can configure Jira effectively for some of the agile projects, and this is what I intend to take you through for today's webinar. We'll take it close to 35 to 40 minutes going through these topics, and then I'll open up for questions. So yeah, I mean, just in case if we have some audiences here who are new to Jira, so maybe a few things to introduce what Jira is about, and we'll go into some of the things in terms of the roles and groups which Jira has to offer, and how these roles and groups could be used to our advantage, because we do have certain roles to play when it comes to Scrum and Agile methodologies, as you know, right? So how we can leverage the roles and groups which Jira gives us to our advantage when we work with Agile projects. So we'll do a quick demo on that as well. And in my opinion, workflow is one of the most important things when it comes to Agile in terms of how you track your work. And I've come across a number of teams who do, to an extent, in my opinion, a bit of a basic version of the workflow that Jira has to offer. But there are a number of things that you can configure when it comes to workflows, and how you can again take it to your advantage. And one of the things that we'll look at today in terms of that demo is going to be how you can restrict some of the actions when it comes to transitioning things from one step to the other in the workflow. So we'll do a quick demo on that. And of course, I would also like to cover some additional best practices and tips required, especially for those who are to an extent new to Jira. How you can probably start with JQL, which is the Jira query language. People get scared sometimes, but it's very easy, right? So it's more of an introduction and some of the tips from my perspective when it comes to JQL dashboards and components. Okay. So yes, I think Jira is one of the most widely used tool. When it comes to agile practices, as you can see here, it's close to around 67% of organizations are looking at Jira as one of the key software to manage their agile projects, or I would say track their agile projects. I think that's a better word today when it comes to management, right? And this is as per the latest, State of Agile Report, just came in probably a few months back, right? And it's been used widely. It's I think probably this is some old information that I have in terms of the number of companies that they serve. It's more than 60,000 companies, and Jira as a platform, if you see, there are multiple parts to that. So people are using Jira not just for agile projects, but in case if some teams are working on service desk kind of applications, so the platform provides you that capability as well. And the standard project management, bug tracking, if that's the flavor, you can use Jira as well for that. And and from that perspective, what they've also given us is, when you create a project in Jira, right, everything is a project in Jira, and you work with what we call as issues. Of course, by issues we do not mean that it's a bug or a kind of an issue as such, but that's how they define, because originally Jira was intended for or being used as a bug tracking system. Of course, they have added a lot of things now. It's, as I said, it's one of the most widely used tool, but they do provide you with a number of templates which you may find useful, right? Especially Kanban, bug tracking. In case of the standard project management, they'll give you some of those templates, because when you take the Jira platform, I mean, if you are going for Jira software, you do get all the things which are related to Jira core with you, all right? And for today's webinar, on the demos, I'll be mainly going through the Jira Cloud version that I have, right? Not the server version, but I don't see there is too much of difference when it comes to that. Now, talking about these roles, yeah, there are some default roles which Jira offers us. Some of these roles are, like, for instance, a project lead role. And the great part about some of these roles is, when it comes to Agile also, You may think of a scrum master who understands the process, and you want to probably make them as project leads when it comes to Jira projects. And all such things can be controlled. It's not about just making them as project leads, but when it comes to certain permissions, managing certain things in terms of who can do what on Jira, you may want to quickly do a lot of permissions based on certain roles. So rather than saying that, okay, I want to give a particular person certain permissions, you may think about giving certain roles those permissions. And these are some of the default roles. We have the project lead. We also have what we call as the default assign, which is typically, when you create an issue. When I say issue, again, probably a story, for that matter, or a feature or a bug. So when we create that, you may want to assign by default to a person, and maybe that person would, eventually when we go into those sprint planning meetings, or so on and so forth, you may, that the team picks up and they reassign. But it's always a good idea that maybe you want to assign it, by default, so at least, if you're tracking on a dashboard or something, it appears for you, right? This default assignees also work well, not just at the project level, but within projects, you would also look at certain components. When I say components, if you think of it, right, any software development project, for instance, right, it probably have a number of modules. Like you may be doing certain things on the front end, the back end, the middle layer. Maybe some of the database changes you want to bring in. Those could be components for you. But later, as we go into the webinar, I'll also show you, or probably I'll talk about more about it in terms of how you can use components to even track multiple projects, right? Multiple teams within a very big project, right? Or maybe you can think of it as a program level, right? So you can again use some of these. And one of the other key roles which they offer us is the project administrator. Now, this is one role which I've seen people use very less of. It's an absolutely wonderful thing, Jira offers us, because as project administrators, you would be able to manage certain parts of Jira which are only going to be reflecting for your teams. It doesn't go and impact other teams. And a number of cases, that's what we want. A lot of times I've seen teams are reluctant to go and go back to your Jira administrators and ask them to make some changes, because often they will come back and say that, if they make a change, it goes and impacts other teams as well, right? And that's what we don't want. We want certain things which are only configurable at the team level, and that's one of the things which project administrator role will give you, right? So definitely I feel, as some of these roles which Jira offers us, right, those were the default roles. And as you know, in Agile, again, we have some of these roles, right? Like you have the product owner, the scrum master, the developers, right? Now you can create additional roles in Jira, right? And then you can assign people to those roles. And again, as I said earlier, that you may want to restrict certain permissions to certain individuals. So instead of individuals, we may want to restrict it to certain roles. Now there is also a concept in Jira called as groups. And those who understand roles, or groups, you would know that it looks, at a high level they look quite similar, because again, groups also has got individuals, right? You can also assign people to groups. But the key point is, when it comes to roles, your project admins, which, possibly you can make a project admin, your scrum master as the project admin, or the product owner as the project admin. And those project admins would then be able to add people to the roles. So the membership, when it comes to the membership of the roles, it can be controlled at the project level. Whereas, when it comes to groups, only a Jira administrator will be able to do that, who is as part of the groups and what permissions and all such things, right? So that in effect, if you see, groups become like global membership. So if you, let's say, if you say that, okay, a particular permission in terms of who should go and delete a particular issue, all right? So as you know, in most cases you will see deleting of issues is restricted to certain individuals, right? But the problem is, if you give those permissions to a group, the group may have the same delete permissions across all different projects, okay? Even the ones which they are not associated with. And that's one of the things, so need to be a bit careful, in terms of using roles versus groups. And in my opinion, roles work perfectly well when it comes to at least one team, and all such things. I mean, if you really look at, where do you see most of the things being worked on by the roles is the boards, right? Like by default, when you create a project, you get a default board, right? I mean, you would have seen that uh, you know uh, typically in an agile project, a Jira project, you would have a board which shows you the workflow of to do, in progress, and done. I mean, in my opinion, that's a very basic one. You need to actually go and change the board configurations, right? Now, another thing that really it offers us is, even if you're a developer or any role that you're playing in the team, you can become a board administrator, right? So it's not just that only certain individuals can go and create boards. You can create one for yourself, right? And by default, when you create a board, you become the board administrator. Of course, you can go and share those boards with others in the team, right? So it's not really required that all the developers create their own boards. Maybe they want to track their own work, yeah, and maybe for that reason, if they want to use it, yeah, I mean, they can. But a better way could be, maybe your lead developer create a board, and in terms of what they precisely want to track, and share that board, share it with other developers, so that it just you don't really what do you say, do a lot of work in terms of it's like a rework, right? If you everyone is doing that. So that's what there's this is another role, I would say, that it gives you a board administrator. This is another role which where you can actually go and configure boards. Of course, the Jira administrator, as they have the permissions across everything, and they will be able to configure most of it, or everything that you want, right? But board administrators, again, and it doesn't mean that if you are a board administrator, then your project admin will have certain things, so maybe you may restrict at the board administrator level. You can possibly restrict on who can and who cannot uh, kind of use it and view it, right? So why don't we look at some of these roles, and what I'm just going to think about, like let's say you are a project administrator, and what kind of board configurations you're going to go and do that, right? So let's head back to one of the Jira instances that I have here. All right. Yep, I think that's the one. So here I am currently logged in as the as the Jira administrator, by the way. All right. And just a demo project that I have here. And how precise, where exactly you would get these roles, right? So if you look at some of your project settings, now you as a developer may or may not have these project settings, unless by default you are an admin for the project, then yes, possibly you can. But otherwise, the project administrators definitely will have this access, right? And we look at as far as the people that are there as per that, right? Now, if you are one of the project administrators, right, you will be able to actually assign members to any kind of roles that are there, right? Talking a bit on roles, where do you see roles? I mean, how do you create roles? First of all, this is what I'm showing you in terms of one project, and a particular project, how the membership could be added. But in terms of where do you create the roles itself, right? So if you actually go to your, I mean, if you are a Jira administrator, of course, the creation of the roles can only be done by the Jira admin. Okay, it cannot be done by anyone else. So if you actually go to your, your Jira administrator board, if you go to your user administration, I think this is where you land, right? So I had something open. Okay, and if you actually go and open the configurations for your Jira, all right, you should see on the left hand panel where you get, it's all about management here now, right? You should see the project roles. Right now, as you can see, I have created a basic project roles like dev team and product owner, right? You can actually go and create any such role. All right, you may say, okay, maybe I want to create sysadmins, okay, or DBAs for that matter, right? So you can always go and create these kind of roles, like for instance DBAs, but I'll just give it short for now, just in the interest of time. And you can just go and create the role. Now the role creation, as I said, can be done by the Jira administrator. But when it comes to the membership, so who becomes, who could actually go and add people there. That's when, if you want to come to your team level, or your project level, right? And as I said, under settings, you'll see people, and this is the time when you should see roles, right? I think I haven't refreshed the screen because we just added one DBA. In my opinion, it should also pop up for us, right? All right. All right, so here we go, right? So we just created one. Now, obviously, you can see that these are some of the roles which are available when it comes to that project, and now you can actually go and add people to that role. All right. So, for instance, if I were to say that, okay, I have done some legwork here, and I already have a person called as Betty, and Betty, let's say she's the product owner, right? So you can, and it's again specific to this project. All right, Betty could be a product owner for multiple projects for that matter. All right, so whoever is managing that particular project can also go and add Betty, right? And maybe you want to go and add, I have Vishal here, and Vishal could be a developer, right? You can go and add one here, right? So now you add such roles, and the greater thing about this is how you manage your permissions. So if you come here and again look at your permission schemes, right? By default, the project will give you a permission scheme. All right, and if you were to say, for instance, that when it comes to backlog management, it's typically the role of the product owner, right? And we would like to restrict, uh, okay, maybe creation of stories is fine, but when it comes to deleting any issues, all right, now deleting, we don't want anyone just to go and go and delete something. I mean, you want to restrict that part. And if you want to do that now, all you have to do is, you need to come and edit it, right? So, and again, this can only be done by the project administrator. Okay, so this is another role which is given to us by the by Jira, right? So, how to create a project administrator and all such things is beyond the scope of today's webinar. But for all matters, so let's say you want to delete an issue, and now at this point you can edit it. And now you can say, all right, we would like to now give this one to a particular role, which is a product owner. And as you know that now we have Betty, the product owner, which we had assigned. So now only Betty would be able to go and delete this. Now let's check this out. Let's go and check this out, right? So in another browser, so we don't lose track of where we are, right? I've just logged in as Betty, as you can see here, right? So she's Betty, all right? And really nice picture here for Betty. And if it's the same project again, right? Demo project, as you can see, right? And we have some stories here. All right, we're okay with that. And let's say these were some of the stories, and whether Betty as the product owner can actually go and delete the issue. So if you look at some of the actions, you should see a delete. But what about others? Yes, we also have Vishal as the developer, which is what we assign. What about Vishal? Whether do you think he'll be able to do it or not? So again, as you can see, I've just logged in here as Vishal. So there's Vishal, by the way. Okay, the one with nice glasses here, right? So yeah, let me just quickly show you. Yeah, so this is Vishal. All right, so so let's go back and see what options Vishal has now when it comes to any of the stories, right? So yeah, I mean, if you again go here, all right, can you see now? Can you see the difference, right? So Vishal as the developer who was assigned to the role of a developer will not have any such issue, any such options, of actually going and kind of removing anything. Yeah. All right. So actually, it really helps you, to at a project level. Frankly, at a project level, it will really help you to control a lot of things on who can do what. Yeah. So that's one of the key parts when it comes to roles and how you can do it. And more importantly, it's not just about assigning people to roles, but it's more about what they can control doing that. And that's being done from the permission scheme. So in my opinion, if you're a regular user of Jira, you should actually get in touch with your Jira administrator, ask them to assign some roles, right? Or at least create some roles, and ensure that some roles have certain permissions. Then you'll be able to manage it pretty well. Okay. Now talking about workflows, this is another this is another one where I feel that it's a wonderful thing to have, and uh, people are missing the point here. Sometimes I feel they are not using it to the full potential. As you know, workflows is what it's actually the steps that's the part of the process. So the process is how you want to produce your value, right? And that's what is reflected as the workflows, right? If you are if you really think about how workflows are done, you can add your statuses and transitions. That's kind of the advanced part of a workflow. But even for all matters, if I just go back here, and if you are one of the project administrators, right? At even at a project level, right? So let's say if you go back to your project. Okay, I'm currently at the permissions level, so let's go back to the project. All right. Okay, it's just taking a while. Okay. All right. I think it's considerably slow today. All right. Yes. So here we are. Okay. So if you come to your, if you come to your project, of course, you can start the sprint. It will actually take you to that, okay. So it starts from today. All right. I'm just going to give it as default. Okay. It takes you to the board, right? So this is what we call as the Scrum board, and it shows you these three states. Now, what you can also do is actually, if you're a board administrator, you can go and do certain board settings, right? And for instance, let's say you want to, if you come to columns, if you want to rename this to, instead of this one, you want to say, okay, I want this considered, from to do it moves to dev, and maybe you want to add a new status called as the as test, for instance, right? You can actually actually go here and just add a status called as test. All right. The moment you do that, and of course it's going to be in progress. The moment you do that, all right, you have a new status called as test, and you'll have to add a column. All right. Yeah. If you just write the column name as same as the test, it should automatically map it for you. All right. And there's one neat trick I would like to show you. You can just go and add a column, and it's going to add a add a, what do you say, if you want to, let's say, after testing you want to do a review. All right. Or maybe after code you want to development, you want to do a review. If I add new column as review, it actually goes and creates the status of review for you. All right. That's a neat trick, sometimes I feel. And you can always move this out and say, all right, so now at the project level, right, your project administrator now would be able to kind of move things, or the team will eventually move the stories, but now the great thing is you have your workflow defined here, which we can see. If you go back to your Scrum board, and you'll be able to see all such things here now, right? So this is what we mean by a simplified workflow. Okay, because you can actually, if you look at the workflow here, you should see that you can actually transition, or you can actually move those stickies, right? You can actually move those stickies from any place to a, any status to any status. So for example, if I go to workflows now, yeah, and yep, I think I clicked something else here, okay, because of the slowness. So let me click the workflow. All right, so yes, this is our workflow. And an easy way to see is, just look at the diagram, and it will actually show how the workflow looks like. So as you can see, it's a simplified workflow, right? So which means that you can actually transition from any status to any status. So it can go from to do to test, and back to do, or it can go from anything to anything. So that's one of the restrictions when it comes to, if you want to add your new statuses, right from the board. Okay, and of course, that's something which the project administrator can do. Now, this is one thing. This is an easy, quick thing, but more importantly, what I would like to talk about here further is how you can actually utilize some of these Kanban or the workflows to track something better. To restrict certain things. By default, if you're creating when you create a project, you get some of those, what do you say, the templates which I talked about, isn't it? And if you create a project, then by default you get some workflows. But when you should consider this. So if you want to restrict some people within your team, restrict in terms of what precisely they can do with those issues, who is supposed to move things from one place to the other. Like for instance, right, if you say that, okay, we are seeing a lot of bugs today, right, and we would like to do some bug fixes, but the quality of our bug fixes isn't so good, and you want to see that, all right, we would like to add a review step, so it has to go through reviews, and we would like to also ensure that how much time people are spending in the reviews. Now this is one additional step that you want to introduce, especially for bugs, right? And that's where your custom workflows. This is what we mean by custom workflows. What we saw earlier was, excuse me, saw earlier was the the simplified ones, but this is when it comes to custom workflows. And custom workflows are going to help you with putting certain conditions which are to be met before you transition from one phase to the other, from one step to the other, right? And during the transition, if you want to check certain inputs, right, then you can add validators. Like for instance, if you say that, okay, before it goes from bug fix, and when it goes from to review, right, I'm sorry, from review to, let's say, you want to say, all right, everything is done for a bug, you want someone to actually say how much time did you spend in review. That's a validation step. So you can do that, and that's where you require a separate thing which is called as transition screen. All right. And in certain cases, you would want what happens after it has transitioned. So if it goes to the next state, you want certain things to happen on by itself. So that's what we mean by post functions. Like for instance, you will say that, all right, if I check in certain things into my my Bitbucket or your GitHub, right? uh, the moment I check in certain things, I want the issue to move from development to and of course everything is fine, the build is done, and you want that thing to go to a tester now, please go and test it out. Now those things you can control with post functions. So you want to reassign someone, that same issue you want to reassign to a tester, then you can do that with post functions, right? Right, or you want to I mean some other examples, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, you have done a coding and you want it to be reviewed by another developer, a senior developer, yeah, maybe, why not, so you can just trigger that. All right, so let's again, let's check it out, with a quick demo on this again. All right, so again, this is something which is you need to be a Jira administrator for that. You will not be able to do it as a project administrator when it comes to creating new workflows. All right, and yes, I think for us to do that, for that to happen, you'll have to go under settings, and if you click on issues, right, if you click on issues, you should see workflows, right? So yes, I think the option is all right. Yeah, so let's create a quick workflow. All right, and yes, I think you can just go and add a workflow, for instance. All right, it's just taking some time. Yeah, you can add a workflow. All right, give this like maybe I can say new workflow. All right, Let's not bother about the description at this point. So the new workflow is something which it's just a name, and we have to start adding the steps, right? All right, it's okay. I hope it doesn't take too long for us. Okay, all right. So so what you need to now do is when you create a workflow, because it's going to ask you to, if you can want to add a status. Yes, you want to add a status. Let's say, considering that thing, you may say that you want to go in, you want to add a new status called bug dev. You want to do a bug development first, right? So let's create this as a new status, right? You don't need to click, like allow all statuses, because we want to customize it, right? And simply say, all right, maybe it's in progress for us, because now it's no longer to do when you're doing a bug fix. So just create this, right, for now. And let's add another status, which is a bug review, right? Okay, I think I had a bug review, so I'm just going to give bug rev, right? I keep doing a number of demos, so probably that's the thing. All right, and yes, I think let's put it in progress for now, and let's create this. All right, and of course, the final one would be would be done. All right, so let's say it's done. Okay. So all right, so because of shortness of time, I'm just going to show you how you can add the some of the statuses here. So let's say you say that, all right, it first, once you open a bug, it has to go to bug dev, and from the bug dev to bug review, right? And then let's say it's done. All right, of course there's going to be a test also, but I hope you get the idea, right? So what you need to do is, when you want to transition from one status to another, you can just simply drag and drop like this, right? So it's going to actually tell that yes, it goes from open to bug dev, right? As you can see, open to bug dev. All right, so open to bug dev, something like that. Okay, let's and yeah, I mean, if you have a transition screen, then you can add that here. Let's keep it simple for now. And similarly, from bug dev to it goes to bug review, right? Right. Okay. Yes. Oops, I'm sorry, I think I did some mistake here. Right, I need to move it back. It just took a longer to refresh, it looks like, and that's why. All right, yes, and yes, and now we want to add a new status from bug dev to bug review, right? So bug dev to bug review, let's say. All right, and then of course, from bug dev to bug review to done, right? So you can just do this. Yeah, all right, so just quickly, I'm just going to add that, right? All right, yeah. So yeah, I mean, we have just created that, right? We just created a new workflow, and under the workflow schemes, now you can actually go and assign it to any of the projects that you want, right? And this is kind of, this is the container workflow scheme, right? As a container. So if you look at it, this was our project, simplified workflow project, right? This is one way. That there are other ways in which you can do that, right? So you can actually go and edit it. And all right, so I hope it comes up fast this time. All right, sorry about the delay here, right? And at this point, the great thing is, you can actually assign it to a particular issue type, right? So if you want this to only happen with bugs, you can do that here, right? And of course, once you do, and of course, only for bugs, this particular, I'm sorry, I think I probably didn't check on the earlier one. I think in the hurry, I made a small mistake. I should have checked the workflow that we wanted to assign. So we kind of, this is the inactive one that we wanted. So we should have clicked here on inactive. Okay, again, it's taking some time. All right. So yes, this is the inactive, and you now need to actually go and assign it in the workflow schemes here. All right. So I think I missed on that. All right, but you get the idea, right? I mean, you actually can go into your workflow schemes and assign a particular workflow to any issue type. All right, and you need to do that. If you are able to do that, right? If you're able to do that, like for instance, I come down here, oops, or in fact, I can show you an easy way as well. Okay. Okay. It's just taking a longer time today. Sorry about that. An easy way could be, you can just go to your projects and do that as well. All right. So again, it's not allowing me to click on projects, but actually you can click on projects, go to workflows there. All right. And, actually you need to add a workflow, add an existing workflow, right? And, you can give this new workflow, right? Right. And you can simply give it to a bug. All right. And yeah, this is how it's done. So you can just click on the new workflow, put it to a bug, and of course you'll have to publish it. And once you publish it, only then you will see some of those statuses available to you. So since I already have some bugs, I'm just going to quickly do that. Just associate it. I know it doesn't look good that maybe some of those are kind of not in to do, right? They should have been in some other state, but let me just quickly do this. And after that, you will be able to go back and change your boards, right? Go back and change your boards, and then when you click on a bug, when you move a bug, that bug will probably go, will only go from open state to the bug review, and and so on and so forth. All right. In fact, you can add conditions as well. Okay, you can say, okay, who actually can do that part, right? Again, for those conditions, you can actually go and add the roles or the groups, right? So that's another thing that you can do. All right. So because of the shortness of time, I would like to just cover a few additional tips. All right, on Jira, which you want. Of course, when it comes to workflows, again, please consider building the workflow with your team, right? Because obviously every member in the team has a role to play, so it's always better that you sit with them and create this, right? Don't do it on your own. And of course, don't try to create too many statuses. It just creates a lot of confusion in terms of what's happening here, right? In case if you're going to remove statuses as a project admin, it could go and impact your reports and dashboards. So just be aware of that. Right? Try to keep it as simple as possible. Now, some additional tips when it comes to jQuery's and filters. Some of you probably are. I'm quite sure. Some of you are already using some of these, right? In case if you're just new to Jira and you want to learn more about jQuery's, my suggestion is always go back to the basics, right? Uh, as you can see in jQuery in Jira, when you go to issues, it will give you both the versions. It will give you an advanced version and a basic version, right? And in the basic version, actually you will be able to, kind of, if I were to, I hope, this is relatively quick for us now. I'll quickly show you, what I mean by basic. So if you go back to our project, right? If you just look at all the issues, right? Right here, issues and filters. right? I've clicked those issues, but it's just taking time. All right. Um, but under issues and filters, you should be able to see all the issues, right? And it's going to give you a JQuery version, as well as you can actually go and see the advanced version of that. All right. So my suggestion is try to work with, as I told you, right? I mean, this is the advanced search. So try and work with the basic search. I mean, that will always help you to actually know, what kind of query actually you will get. Use those queries and then go to the advanced versions. That's my suggestion is. All right. So just do that. All right. You should see some drop downs here. I think it's just taking time, but you should see some drop downs here when it comes to the basic version. Okay, so that's what I meant by learning more on jQuery using basics. Right. Let's look at some other parts. So those searches, you can save it as filters, right? Try to use that rather than giving those queries again and again. Save it, save it, and of course, great part is this filters you can also share it with others. Yeah, share it with your team members. Don't need to again repeat your things. And one of the last things I would like to cover is the components. Right, every project will have components. And as I gave you earlier, as I told you earlier, you have the database UI components, but you can actually use components to also track multiple teams' work. Consider your different teams as components, right? And then what you should do is go back to your board settings, and those board settings you may want to create, use your query results as your swim lanes, right? If you use query results as your swim lanes, it's as good as tracking multiple teams work on the same board. Of course, there are limitations because it's still a single project, so it's going to be a single backlog for all these multiple teams. All right, so just be aware of that. And yes, there is a way in which you can, in case if you say that okay, all these different teams which are there with me, which are components, right? And you want to track multiple sprints. Yeah, you want to assign some sprints to multiple teams. Again, that's something which you can do. And that's what we call as parallel sprints. You'll have to get in touch with your Jira admin to ask them to enable parallel sprints, because by default it only gives you one sprint which you can create at a time, but you can create multiple sprints. And my final tips here would be, you would like to get notified, right? I mean, what's happening on a particular issue. For that, you don't really need to go and modify your notification schemes. Try to use watchers. Every issue you will be able to see a watcher. Just click that and go back to your dashboards, change some of the filters and queries where you as a watcher you'll be able to get. You'd probably want to use gadgets for that. If you want to use the same thing for dashboards, try to use some gadgets where you're using watchers, right? And as I said, if you can track multiple projects. Use those jQuery queries for multiple projects. Use your Jekyll queries and then create boards, right? Save those as filters, create different boards. And as you know now, you can become a board administrator. And on that board now, you'll be able to track multiple projects.